Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neal C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and I am incredibly excited to get today's guest on. He was just one of those uber cool guys that I could have sat down with over whiskey and tacos, sharing crazy stories into the night, and one day I do hope to make that happen. But in more serious matters, banks, retailers, healthcare institutions, etc. have become some of the biggest targets for hackers over the last few years. And with money and private information dangling like a carrot on a stick, it's an obvious choice for them. And while interest has expanded to other industries as data has been monetised, these are still a prime target for hackers. And with large networks, hackers can breach platforms and get access to financial institutions' data and customer payment information and patient files. So with that looming threat constantly growing in complexity, cybersecurity organisations need to think a little bit differently and start sharing information to develop a roadmap to defeat these malicious actors. And for anyone outside of the industry, this is best done by Information Sharing and Analysis Centres, or ISACs. And that is somewhere where cybersecurity professionals can anonymously share these details about threat vectors so that other organisations can be on the prowl and prevent attacks before they happen. Now, we all know that there are large networks of hackers and malicious actors that gather together on online forums, share tips, and work together. So my question is, why do organisations not do that? And why they're so hesitant? That's why I've invited Neal Dennis onto the podcast today, threat intelligence specialist at Cyware. So enough from me. Buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Texas so we can speak with Neal now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. My name's Neal Dennis. I currently work as a threat intel specialist of sorts over at Cyware.com, amongst several other different roles. My background, I'm a Marine intel guy, linguist by trade originally, and early 2000s before cyber was cool, and got thrown over the fence into that world very, very quickly in the early 2000s. Done a lot of work as a government contractor, all the secret U.S. spooky stuff that y'all can think of. I may or may not have at least seen people doing it. And then mostly nowadays, I focus a lot on client success and kind of helping educate product and engineering teams at the company around what the landscape looks like, what the customer base is looking for, and kind of help prioritize, that product growth from the customer experience perspective.
And assuming if you tell me you won't have to kill me, I've got to ask, how did you get from being a Marine to going into cybersecurity? Is there a story there?
Yeah, it's a really easy, simple one. As a Marine, especially right after 9/11, there's all these deployment opportunities, right? So I started off as just a plain Jane linguist, doing linguisty things, listening to things and translating and all that fun stuff, and non-technical. I had no clue what cyber even meant. I went to formation one day because I was tired of sitting behind a desk. Had gone from a deployment, came back, got stuck behind a desk. I was ready to go again. And usually at the formations, the platoon commander would start off by one, doing a head count, and then two, saying, hey, I've got recs for X, Y, and Z things that we need to go send people to. And so knowing it was coming down, I didn't wait for him to finish his statement. I literally raised my hand and said, I'll do it. And he said, congratulations, you're going out to a cybersecurity program in Florida. I'm like, don't know what that is, but I'll do it. And then the rest is literally history. I went out to the course. It was a crash course in kind of network routing and fundamentals and understanding how to actually what binary was of all things and actually being able to write it out and all this fun junk, base all this. And came back after about 4 months and, there we go. For the last 18 years now, my career trajectory has been courtesy of that one little hand raise at a military formation.
Wow, it's incredibly cool. And funny how your life can change there, like you say, just from putting your hand up. But here we are in 2021, and I've got to ask, what is Cyware and what makes it different from all those other cybersecurity solutions out there?
Yes. So Cyware is kind of first in breed from a totality like fusion center concept. Being able to, out of the box, bring together all the little elements within a security organization that normally don't work together per se. Sometimes you see a SOC doing a SOC thing, you see a threat hunter team doing their own thing, red team, fraud investigations, all these other things. And so kind of one of the big goals for Cyware is to bring technology to play that focuses on that cybersecurity element, but allows everybody to come together, do that swapping and collaboration of information throughout the different types of tool stacks, threat intelligence wrapped into that, and then information sharing both internal to an org and external to sharing communities as well. And then the last piece of that is once you figure all that out with the tool stack, helping you wrap up kind of like an automation layer around all that to kind of alleviate some of the strain of all that. So kind of an out-of-the-box fusion center concept where we cross the totality of what that means from automation to intel enrichment and all that other fun stuff.
Excellent. And if we look at, let's say, banks, retailers and healthcare institutions, I think the one thing that they've all got in common, that they've all been some of the biggest targets for hackers for years now. But with money and private information dangling like a carrot on a stick, it is an obvious choice. And while interest has expanded to other industries as data has been monetized, they're still prime target for hackers. So I've got to ask, can you set the scene and expand on what that threat landscape looks like at the moment?
I think we just had a drastic shift in what that's going to look like here over this last week with the stock market stuff. I do believe that courtesy of all this wonderful news and publicity going out, that we went from just general social engineering stuff, all the typical stuff we see year over year at a high level, looking for database exploits, remote desktop type tool sets, general social engineering across the very spectrum, looking to get whatever they can get from healthcare data to FinSec data and accordingly. But dude, this stock market craze issue, I think is going to spin off a massive amount of fictitious trading sites. It's going to spin off a massive amount of social engineering stuff that's just going to eat people away who aren't ready for it, because everybody sees this in national news, international news even, right? And they're all going to be hungry for insights on what's going on. So I think for a short time, this is basically replacing the COVID, 2020 social engineering hacks that we had going on for social engineering stuff. And it's probably going to be here for a couple months. But overall, long term, it's mostly business as usual. I think we might see a little bit more growth in control systems and like embedded systems like IoT, not necessarily power, but the election we just had this past year in the US was kind of big. So everybody's going to pay attention to that again in the coming year and a half for the next 2-year election cycle. But yeah, I mean, probably business as usual with a little bit more flair on FinSec, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And with these looming threats constantly growing in complexity, cybersecurity organizations are challenged to share threat information to develop a roadmap to defeat these malicious actors. But can you expand on information sharing and analysis centers, ISACs, and where I believe it's where cybersecurity professionals can anonymously share these details about threat vectors for others to be on the prowl for? But can you just expand on that for people that have not heard of it?
Yeah, so ISACs, and there's another term out there, ISAOs, Information Sharing Analysis Organizations. To punctuate this as a differentiation, ISACs here in the U.S. typically are they're more focused on an industry vertical. So if we look at FS ISAC, Health ISAC, newly stood up Space ISAC, for instance, and going down that list a little bit more. ISACs are typically industry vertical focused, and a lot of times they'll have a tie back to maybe like DHS to help partner that government sharing pipeline to make sure everything's kind of nice and circular in that aspect. But within the organizations themselves, if we look at ISALs can be whatever. They can be regional. They can be a city that stands up a sharing thing to maybe make their own fusion center within the rest of the companies inside the city. An anecdote that someone used to give me is now that we have ISALs available, someone could stand up here in San Antonio, Texas, the mariachi ISAL if they wanted to, for all intents and purposes. But at the end of the day, their core concepts for both of those are basically the same. It's let's get professionals within whatever this vein is, in some kind of portal, in some kind of room, email, some communication methodology to share data that's important to help stop these threats from growing and impacting that group or groups that they're connected to, right? And so a lot of that can be done anonymously with most of these sharing communities. A lot of it is also done in an attributable way, just so people inside that secure wall can have conversations. But really, the sky's the limit. If you want to come in and you can take part of one, do so, and you can do so anonymously to your heart's content almost all the time.
And the fact that it's anonymous makes it a bit of a no-brainer to me. But so the big question has got to be, why are so many organizations possibly hesitant to do that?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. It's kind of multi-pronged. The big part is a lot of organizations used to worry about from a legality perspective, ironically enough. It used to be, like if we go back to the ISAC side of the house, if you're in an industry vertical like that, some of these companies have non-compete legal things that they have to worry about from a non-compete way, whether that's from, regulations in the country they're part of, or whether that's just business politics, right? And so some of these companies think back in the day that sharing something like cybersecurity information, as silly as it is, was kind of mitigating that non-compete perspective simply because their next door competitor happened to be on the same distro. I think we're kind of getting over that piece a little bit, but it does still happen. The other part of this is just time. A lot of people don't have the resources necessary to consume the data, yet alone effectively share back out when they do see something of interest. And so that's kind of, I think where we're at now is educating people how to get over that part and how to make them efficient in a more automated manner. But yeah, the biggest thing is probably just time management, and it's not ingrained into the culture of the company. So they haven't made that effort to make it a timely endeavor for them.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it, that hackers share information all the time on a variety of forums, etc., but the good guys just won't do it, which is just crazy to me. Do you think if a mindset was to change there, that we could prevent high-profile breaches like we've seen with, let's say, Capital One and Marriott, etc., that spring to mind?
I do. We're never going to obviously get rid of all of it by any means. But a lot of these compromises, there were some wonderful little indicators out there in the atmosphere that could have given someone a heads up, at least from the tool sets that were about to be leveraged and the recon phases that were going on during this, and had some of these industries had a little bit more, or people within the industries even had a little bit more robust understanding of what mattered, as well as when and where to share that data. You would definitely see a downward tick in a lot of these major compromises. You would see less breaches overall. And then more importantly, you'd see remediation occur a lot faster, right? Because, people are going to share that information and stop it farther out into the security stack instead of it getting into that personal computer where all the fun stuff is.
And something I always try and do with every guest on this podcast, because I think we're all surrounded by a variety of myths and misconceptions about just about everything. So are there any misconceptions of threat sharing and ISACs that many organizations or decision makers might have that we can just finally lay to rest today?
Yeah, definitely. One being that information sharing is hard or is potentially sensitive or difficult in that respect. It doesn't take a lot to be valuable to your sharing community, whether that's just acknowledging the fact that someone sent something over and that you didn't see it, or that you did see it. Something like that, as simple as when someone sends an email event that they saw from a phishing or mouse spam event saying, hey guys, gals, we saw this in our infrastructure, just kind of looking for either more information, or usually the big question is, did anybody else see this, or are we alone? And what I see sometimes is, there's a hesitance to even reply yes, no, when that's a quick thing, right? Takes 10 seconds, pending whatever research you may have done. So that's kind of, to me, is a big thing. People think that the only way to be beneficial back to these orgs is to be sharing observables, threat indicators, and things of that data intel back into these things. But it can be literally as simple as knowing that, letting them know that they're not alone when something bad happened, or that they saw the same campaign, whatever it's at. And then the other part of this is, I think a lot of people see information sharing centers and communities like this as an altruistic endeavor. I think they see it as, if I'm going to take time from my workday as a company to put information into this, that's me being nice. In reality, the shift needs to be, that's not me necessarily being nice. It's great. Thank you very much. We love you for doing it. But it needs to change mentality that it's no longer just me finding time to be nice. It needs to become a cultural requirement to be a part of this, to be sharing information. And once again, even if it's just a yes, no response, right? But to be engaged, to be a part of your community and not just pure consumption, find methodologies that support that. And to be fair, there will always be companies that have manning issues where they can't be an active participant, where they are in consumption mode. And that's the cool thing about these communities, is the companies that are larger and within these verticals that they're playing in, the companies that are able to get that cultural shift over or find that extra, hour a week to participate, they help these other companies that are literally just there because they need information. They have absolutely no bodies to do anything with because they're in pure consumption mode at that low end, small business side in particular. And so the great thing is these companies that can help benefit the rest, right? But just getting over the hump that it's not an altruistic act. It needs to be a culturally important act. It needs to be ingrained into their psyche that this should be happening in some fashion.
And something I feel I've got to bring up here is Cyware was recognised in Gartner's 2020 Market Guide for Security, Orchestration, Automation and Response Solutions. But can you tell me more about that and what it means to you guys? Because it's phenomenal, isn't it?
It is. So this was, to me, this was great. I'd been working at the company only, 4 or 5 months when this came down. And it just kind of, for me personally, reinvigorated the idea that I was probably in the right spot from a solutions perspective to help the security industry. But in general, the company, we're kind of, once again, first in class, best, first to the doorstep there for the totality of what it means to do SOAR inside one product. Case management, orchestration, automation, intel, all that stuff wrapped into one interoperable kind of tool sets across the board, right? And I think what's even better, no longer have to worry about kind of upgrade paths or interoperability within this construct here because we have it all available. But more importantly, on that same vein, is if someone's trying to look to grow into a more holistic approach, we can support each of those little elements along the way through different tool solutions while you grow and build out your team. And at the end of the day, if SOAR is your goal, we can literally take the entire concept out of one solution option and give it to you. Or if a piece of that is your goal at a time, we can help you build around that and grow it until you can reach totality around the whole SOAR concept.
Excellent. Well, I've loved chatting with you today. But before I do let you go, for anyone listening that would like to find out a little bit more information, email your team or anything like that, what's the best way of getting more information?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to head over to Cyware.com and kind of poke around at the FAQs and stuff like that. If anybody wants to reach out that direction, there's some good email contacts and additional materials on what Cyware is about and how to get in touch with the sales and marketing team for sure.
Well, like I said a few moments ago, I do think it's kind of ironic that hackers are sharing information all the time. The good guys have been hesitant about ISACs, but I've got a feeling that is changing now. And there is this whole feeling of collaborating and overcoming situations like this. Also got to thank you for coming on and sharing your story today. And I love how just from that one moment that you chose to put your hand up and where you are now, I love hearing stories like that. So just thanks for joining me on the podcast today. And if I can ever fly again, tacos and whiskey in San Antonio it is. But thanks for joining.
Yes, sir. Man, Neal, thank you very much for your time, but I hope you have a good afternoon over there.
I can't thank Neal enough for coming on and discussing why it is so important for the cybersecurity industry to share threat information. Because, like I said at the very beginning of the podcast, hackers do it. So shouldn't businesses and cybersecurity experts? Also, thanks to Neal for sharing how, if we did take that different approach, it could prevent the next Capital One or Marriott breach. And also, thanks to Neal for debunking those misconceptions of threat sharing and ISACs that many organisations might have. But I do invite any of you to share your insights, expertise, experiences, whatever it may be, by simply emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. You'll find over 1,500 interviews on my website, and you'll also find links to my podcast with Netgear and Citrix. And if you scroll right to the bottom, there'll be links to all my social channels, but I'll give you a little heads up. It's just Neal C. Hughes at anything from Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn to the new Clubhouse, which I've not had a look at yet. So meet me here tomorrow, same time, same place. We'll do it all again. But more than anything, just a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neal C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.